Number, please.
For the first time in 14 years, a new voice will make the call on draft night.
The Green Bay Packers select Aaron Rodgers.
Ted Thompson's first ever draft pick is going to Canton, and in the back of the war room that day was then Southeast scout Brian Gutekunst. For years, he helped and then watched Thompson set the draft board. Now, that's his job.
Stuff I've been doing for 20 years, so it has, that part hasn't changed a whole lot. With the exception of at the end of the evaluation period, I'm the one that puts him up there.
And the one making that final call. Only the future knows how good Goody's first pick will be, but we do know this. While being aggressive in other personnel areas, he will practice what Ted preached.
The lifeblood of your team will always come from the draft.
That lifeblood starts pumping Thursday night.
So you ready for the draft? Let's get started.
But Cover 2 Draft Edition starts now. How you doing, everybody? Thanks for joining us tonight for Cover 2 Draft Edition. Well, Ted Thompson always said he liked more swings at the plate. His successor, as of right now, has more swings than anybody else. Brian Gutekunst, armed with 12 draft picks heading into his first draft as general manager, and most of those picks will come higher in each round than his predecessor. Now, the Packers have the 14th pick in the first round. That's the highest they will select since 2009, but Goody might be able to go higher if he's willing to deal some of those 12 draft picks. It's possible an early first-round run on quarterbacks could push a player he really covets down to trade range, but before he entertains any of those possibilities, Goody and his staff must properly rank those players.
It's important, especially early on, that you build the board kind of purely and and value-wise, and making sure you're getting the players correct. I think over the last 2 weeks now, we're starting to do more scenario-driven things where, okay, this is the capital we have, and this is where the board is strong. If we are able to move here, this gives us a better, better options than if we stay where we're at. I think there's a little bit more predictability as far as how it's going to fall than when you're way back there.
All right, so is he going to be aggressive? Will he let the board come to him? We'll find out this weekend. Now, Brian told us at the Scouting Combine in February that not much really changes in his job duties moving to the big chair, except that it will be his name on the decisions that are made this weekend. And you cannot overstate what a big difference that is. So how do we know that this former Division III college football player at La Crosse and longtime scout is ready for prime time? Well, ask some of the people who know him best.
Brian was my first intern, really. You could tell back then he was a football guy. Yeah. He had a coaching background. So he understood the game, from his dad being an old coach, and so that's the one thing you knew. He understood the game. He was all football, and he worked hard.
The whole New England philosophy of they have guys that coach and to do personnel, and so they usually start guys off with personnel, and then they'll be coaching as well. And Goody had that. He was like the head coach of the JV team in college and everything, and his father was a longtime coach, so and then just the work ethic and being able to talk ball. He was a guy that could just talk football with you right away and was confident right away because he was confident in his work ethic.
I think everybody in Packer Nation should understand he's a very passionate, driven football man, and he's one of those guys who's always willing to work in a collaborative effort in terms of keeping everybody together and keeping the team solely focused on one objective, and that is to win games.
I do think he feels more like a modern NFL general manager. Early on in free agency, I said that this is the most non-Ted Thompson start to free agency that I've ever seen. And, I applaud him.
Josh Jackson, Iowa, he also had some success against the Badgers. What's his skill set?
He takes, this is a really strange story. Here's a guy who didn't play at all, hardly, his first few years. Last year with Iowa, a whole bunch of turnovers. Had against back-to-back games against Wisconsin, Ohio State, 6 total turnovers. He had the 2 pick sixes against the Badgers. Yeah. He's a bigger guy, not quite as fast as Ward, but takes the ball away. And you've talked to Joe Witt for how many years now? What does Joe Witt like? Guys who take the ball away, right?
Mm-hmm. When you look at the skill set for these guys, are these outside corners, slot corners?
Yeah, both those guys I would say are the outside guys. You know what? They've re-signed Devon House. They've re-signed Tremont Williams. They've got Kevin King. Maybe they go for the slot guy, right? One guy, we're going to talk about Micah Fitzpatrick in a minute. Mike Hughes from Central Florida, kind of a shorter guy, a little over 5'10". The Packers have never drafted anybody that short. But they brought him in for an interview, so I think that means the Packers maybe have some interest there.
You mentioned Minkah Fitzpatrick. He's a guy that took the ball away at Alabama, and he's a guy that took it the distance for pick sixes more often than not when he got his hands on the ball. He's a guy that's viewed as more of a slot cornerback. Will he even be there at 14, though?
The guys I've talked to, about a 50-50 chance on him. Nick Saban loves the guy, and if he loves you, that probably means something. He's 6 foot, he's fast, he had 6 interceptions as a sophomore. He's kind of Micah Hyde, but bigger and faster. In fact, you can play him at safety, you can play him in the slot. A lot of versatility there.
He could be a slot corner pick that the Packers use there now.
Before landing in the Packers' laps, he waited for 5 hours in New York.
I would imagine the last 24 hours quite the roller coaster. What was the hardest thing about the wait yesterday?
Just the ups and downs of thinking you're going to get picked at a certain spot and then not. We're hoping, to go a little earlier, but it seems like we've fallen into paradise, and it's a great situation for me. Make sure those 23 teams who didn't pick me, make sure they know they made a mistake.
He's certainly done that many times over, and he's done it so well that Aaron Rodgers now in line to become the highest paid player in league history. Of course, he's been there before when he signed his last contract extension. That came on the second day of the 2013 NFL Draft. That extension was reached with 2 years remaining on his current contract, which is the case again right now. But of course now, Rodgers is not the highest paid player anymore. He's not even at his position. In fact, he ranks 9th in average salary, $6 million less than leader Kirk Cousins, the same guy who has never won a playoff game.
The NFL is certifiably out of its mind, because if I told you the 2 highest paid players in NFL history would be Kirk Cousins and Jimmy Garoppolo, I would be committed right now. I would not be standing here in Orlando, Florida. I would be at the Orlando Sanitarium. It's only a matter of time before Aaron Rodgers and Matt Ryan stand above them, and the first number on their contract is a 3, not a 2.
It's not typical to see a Division III football player get a shot at the NFL, much less make the team. But there's always exceptions. UW-Oshkosh has had 2 players in as many years spend some time in the league in some capacity, and Sam Mankowski figures to be the 3rd in that line.
What I kept telling my agent was, you get me in the pro day and I'm going to put up good numbers.
How good? His 4.4 140 would have tied for 3rd amongst receivers at the Combine. His 4-second short shuttle would have ranked 1st. His 3-cone drill, 7th.
I definitely had some guys coming up to me and they're just like, who are you? Like, where did you come from? Like some of the guys that were in the pro day, and then guys like Jonathan Taylor, Dakota Dixon, other Badgers that like I see all over TV.
And welcome back to Cover 2 Draft Edition, everybody. Time now to go on the clock. It's going to look a little different tonight. You will notice that Rob Domofsky is absent. We're very grateful. Aaron Nagler, PackerNews.com, pinch hitting tonight. Now, the reason Rob is not here is because, well, let's face it, he had to do his day job in Bristol.
Rob Domofsky covers Green Bay during the season, and he goes to the podium with the 14th overall pick. Rob.
With the 14th pick in the ESPN NFL Nation mock draft, the Packers select Marcus Davenport, defensive end, UT San Antonio.
All right, so there's Rob.
God, he looked short behind that podium, didn't he?
He had a little riser behind there.
Did he use the box?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I told him not to trip on the stairs because they show him coming down the stairs, because that would have been great for our show. So please say hello once again, Jason Wilde, ESPNWisconsin.com, and Aaron Nagler, PackerNews.com. Thank you again, sir, for pinch hitting. Of course, Mark Daniels, WTAQ.com. So we have to start with Aaron Rodgers. There's been a lot of news in the offseason for him. But let's be honest, this would not even be a discussion, Jason, if you had your way. We're going to crank up the Wayback Machine real quick to our pre-draft special back in 2005.
Oh, no.
Jason, Ted Thompson is blank if he drafts a quarterback in the first round. Foolish. I think that they need to wait later in the draft and get some help that can help them immediately early.
That's outstanding.
Well, he would have been foolish had he taken any of the other quarterbacks.
Too, yeah.
Foolish.
Wow, I look so young. Gosh, I look good.
Did you enjoy that?
I did. That was awesome.
All right, we're going to let you start out on this. Does Aaron Rodgers just need a collective hug from the Packers right now? Where is this relationship?
Look, he gets announced as a minority owner in the Bucs. Right. He talks about how he wants to spend the rest of his career. He says all these things, but Mark, you remember this? We would go to press conferences with Brett Favre where he would say stuff like, well, someday somebody else is going to be the quarterback here, and they might not even want me here. And we go, no, Brett, no. Come on. So you can't rule anything.
The problem was Brett did that for like 5 years in a row.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. And he was at a different age. And my point is that Aaron Rodgers never said when we talked to him the other day that he doesn't want to be part of the conversation. He kept saying he knows his role. He said that's a question for other people. So I don't think that everything is all hunky-dory. But again, I think he's realistic enough to know, A, nothing's going to change. They have control over him for the next 4 years. Whatever leverage he has is basically predicated, Aaron, on not playing, and he's not going to do that. So what's he knows his situation.
Well, he knows his situation, and like you say, he's saying the right things. But ultimately, it doesn't matter. I mean, by the time September rolls around, they're playing football. I really think a lot of this is going to be not forgotten, but it's really not going to matter once they lace him up and take the field. Look, like you say, he's under contract for 2 years. They've got the franchise tag to control him 2 years after that. Does he want to be part of the conversation? Probably. Should he be? The Packers think no. I agree with the Packers. You mentioned Brett Favre. Brett Favre demanding a trade after they failed to trade for Randy Moss back in the day. He comes out and says, I never said any of that. I never said I wanted. And we know he did. Right. Rodgers is the exact same way now. The tweet about fake news and all of that. I mean, Rodgers would serve himself a lot more if he would just come out and say these things rather than taking passive-aggressive shots.
I'm a little miffed at the whole thing in this regard. If he was a 5-year veteran, first-time MVP, and suddenly they cut Jordy Nelson after 4 productive seasons together, say, whoa, that one caught me out. He's been in the league a dozen years. He has rolled out how many different receivers that have come and gone.
Is it too convenient for the rest of us to look and say, those are the trading partners that you're going to have because of the relationships you have?
I don't think so. I think sometimes they're more comfortable, because you certainly have a relationship and a trust factor with that. But at the same time, that won't limit us to that. We had, just because I've worked with those guys in the past doesn't mean I don't have relationships with many other people through this league.
He's got 12 draft picks, most of any team.
I know. I'm right behind him with 11, so we'll keep each other on speed dial to see if he want to do some business.
Just getting the call from Ted, seeing the 920 area code, letting that whole the thought and the idea really sink in, and just kind of saying, okay, here's my opportunity. With going through the draft, you're given an opportunity. So I was blessed with my opportunity, and was obviously excited and very fortunate for it.
And welcome back, everybody. David Bakhtiari, a 4th-round gem. And you could argue that Ted Thompson did some very heavy lifting in the later rounds of the draft. In fact, the last 3 Packers to receive lucrative extensions at the conclusion of their rookie deals were all drafted in the 4th round or later. David, Mike Daniels in the 4th round 2012, and center Corey Lindsey, he was a 5th-round pick back in 2014. So there is value to be had in the later rounds, which is why Dave and Bill return with some possible later round Packer targets.
So what gems might be there for the Packers on day 2 and day 3 in the draft? The Green Bay Packers' loss of Jordy Nelson perhaps opens up a hole at wide receiver. The Packers have some depth there, but you could always use more pass catchers. The Packers are lucky in this draft. There aren't a lot of first-round talents at wide receiver that could distract them from their defensive needs, but there are some guys on day 2 and 3 that might be there. Let's talk about Christian Kirk from Texas A&M first.
Kind of a slot guy. Now, this is a forward-thinking pick. Obviously, Randall Cobb last year under contract. Do you need to draft his replacement? I talked to a scout. He said he's Randall Cobb, but a little bit faster. And, Cobb is such a tough guy. He fights for every single inch, just as Christian Kirk. Good Christian Kirk fact, he likes liver shakes.
Interesting.
Swear to God. But 5'10", had a lot of production at Texas A&M. Also 7 kick return touchdowns. So he's kind of that Randall Cobb kind of mold.
What round do you think he might go?
Second, maybe late first, but where Green Bay is sitting at 45, that might be the sweet spot for him.
I'm a Golden Domer. I'm from South Bend originally. Let's talk about the Irish's Equiminius St. Brown. What skill set does he bring, and where might he go?
He's tall and he's fast, and this is the Jordy Nelson pick. I mean, obviously he's taller than Jordy, he's 6'5", but what did Nelson do for all those years? It was all those home run plays. St. Brown, 6'5", ran in the 4.4s. With Deshaun Kaiser in 2016, he averaged about 18 yards a catch, scored 9 touchdowns. His production was really pretty poor last year with a bad quarterback, but this is a big play guy, a little bit raw. He's son of former Mr. Olympian John Brown.
I was 21 when I got drafted. They gave me a free phone, which at the time was a Razor. If you remember the Razor phone, it was like the coolest thing possible. And I had a 917 number, so I was like, man, I got a New York Razor phone. Like, this is pretty awesome.
It was awesome. I had a Razor phone. Those were great. All right, here is the mock draft selections for all of us on the show here tonight. Jason Wilde, you heard his pick. Rob Demoski made his pick last night on ESPN. Marcus Davenport. There's Mark Daniels' pick. And Aaron Nagler going with Derwin James out of Florida State. As for the WBAY sports staff, I'm going with Harold Landry because I think the guys that they want ahead of him will be gone, so they want to get an edge rusher. I want him to get an edge rusher. Denzel Ward for Dave Schrader. Tremaine Edmonds, inside linebacker, can play outside for Lindsey Polaris. And Bill Huber going with Landry, just like I did.